te quedas con nosotros, que ahora empezamos la ronda de preguntas. ¿Te sientas, por favor, ahí? Y pido, por favor, al resto de los ponentes que suban. Please, I need you. Por favor, muchas gracias porque habéis enviado preguntas muy interesantes para todos los ponentes, pero no podemos dejar a Juan sin ninguna, así que por favor, irnos mandando las últimas preguntas para Juan para que él también nos pueda participar de la mesa redonda. Aquí, Steven y John. Okay, guys, I will do the question in Spanish for the audience, for the guests, and it will be translated for you. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So let's gonna start with John. John Dalton, nos has hablado del índice de Europa y de América. ¿Cómo importante es el Customer Experience en mercados emergentes como Rusia, Asia, India, donde cada vez hay clientes con un poder adquisitivo mayor, aunque sean minorías, pero minorías muy numerosas?
Yes. So what is the question?
The question is, ¿la experiencia de cliente es igual de importante en mercados emergentes como lo es, como empieza a serlo en Europa y en América?
Yes, it is. I think that what we've seen particularly in Asia is that while there are some, good Lord, is that me? Yes, gosh, shocking.
Sorry, let me introduce you that. Durante las sesiones hemos tenido aquí a unos dibujantes que nos han acompañado de la empresa Dibujo a Domicilio, que han estado haciendo unos retratos vuestros con las emociones que les ha generado vuestra presentación, y es lo que vamos a ir viendo a lo largo de vuestras respuestas.
It's all right. Like John Goodman. It is important in emerging markets. I think what we're seeing, though, and I hate to be too simplistic, but I do think that we find that in emerging markets there has been so much energy and effort in, to some extent, recreating some of the market dynamism of the developed world, that a lot of the experiences that we find companies focusing on in these emerging markets are very, very basic. They're almost, to the professor's point, they're almost based on utility and price and function as a kind of foundation, as opposed to trying to imitate or trying to deliver memorable experiences or emotionally engaging experiences. This is not to say that there aren't companies doing that, but they're not on. They're not at the same level yet. But interestingly, the customer experience stream of research at Forrester, we're seeing a lot of growth in emerging markets. There's been a noticeable increase in requests coming to us from emerging markets about strategy, measurement, and governance, and design, especially design, product and service design. They want to know a lot about that. So it may be that they accelerate much faster than we think, but at the time being, it is important, but it's not as sophisticated.
Okay, thank you. Stephen, a question for you. It looks nice.
Yeah, that's much better. Yeah,
that's for sure.
That's much better.
Like I need a shave.
You can work with that. But
the question for you, Stephen, is: ¿qué tiene más coste? ¿Que hablen mal de tu compañía o que no hablen?
That's a very good question. I think, how am I going to answer? I spoke about the value of time spent, well-spent time. And of course, there's another way to look at experiences, the cost of time spent badly. So for me, I think that's the other side of the coin of experience, is taking out those pain points. That can't be denied. It probably depends what your product or service you're selling, of course. But for me, I think that's the low-hanging fruit. Frequently in experience, That's the one that costs money to organizations, and quite frankly, it's also the entry point for a lot of organizations. When I deal with them, it's kind of like, where's the pain point? Where's the dissatisfaction? How can we remove that? Let's be realistic. If that's the entry point, at least people are starting to speak about experiences, maybe in a different way than you'd like them to. My issue with no experiences at all is that tends to be, that's about effort, efficiency. That's not really creating a memorable moment. So it's not really the fact that it does damage. It's kind of like missing the point, in my opinion. I think at least if you're talking even about bad experiences, you're getting the point. So for me, that's a better way to start than to focus the effort on let's create ease, efficiency, and not think about those personal and memorable moments.
Okay, thank you. Alain, question for you. You're waiting for your picture. Well, I have this question in English, so I will do in English first and then translate. What if your CEO is not a big fan of dancing without a shirt, but you do? ¿Qué pasa si tu CEO realmente no es fan de que bailes sin camisa, pero tú lo haces?
I think you can teach him to dance. No, I think it's okay. If the CEO really doesn't believe in focusing on the customer, you've got a problem. Because there's this old saying that you cannot turn a cow into a rabbit. I made that up. But the idea behind it is that most CEOs are interested, even if they're not that customer-oriented, they're interested in money. Which means that those CEOs you can usually convince with a quality business case and some proof points, okay, let's do some small projects and sort of like prove that this actually works, and then sort of sway them over. And for the rest, basically a good CEO usually sees that if enough people in the organization start dancing, start believing in a certain thing, then, if they're good, they'll go along.
Okay, thank you. Bueno, Juan, para ti también hay, ya han empezado a llegar. Si pensabas que te ibas a liberar. Lo que no sé si ha llegado tu dibujo, pero ahí estará llegando. La pregunta es muy directa. Venga, Juan, mójate. Dinos 2 empresas auténticas, una española y por qué lo son.
¿Me puedo llevar los dibujos luego?
¿Perdón?
No, luego, que me encanta.
Por supuesto, los dibujos son para vosotros.
A ver, una empresa que no lo sea, no te puedo decir el nombre, eso estaría feísimo. Una empresa que sí lo sea, sí, en España, ISS, es una empresa que trabaja en entornos business to business, que hace muchas cosas, pero su principal servicio es dar limpieza a edificios, y hace también jardinería y plagas y tratamiento y catering y seguridad, es decir, servicios relacionados con facilities, que tiene casi 30.000 empleados en España solo, y que es una empresa absolutamente auténtica, y donde la diferencia la marcan las personas, y lo ves. Y esto no es que te lo digan ellos, es que te les preguntan a los clientes y notan, sienten la diferencia de que hay allí gente de ISS en sus oficinas, en el sitio donde trabajan, o que vengan de otro sitio. Pues por la forma como esas personas se comportan, viven, sienten, viven lo que hacen, se creen lo que hacen. Absolutamente. Y no estoy haciendo propaganda, lo que como me has preguntado, te digo, ISS España, absolutamente, un ejemplo bueno.
Estupendo, o sea que la diferencia al final está en las personas.
Sí. En ISS lo que pasa es que se lo creen arriba. Esto es la línea de lo que decía Alain, ¿no? O sea, se lo creen desde arriba. Entonces, claro, cuando se lo creen desde arriba es más fácil, supongo, bajarlo, ¿no? Pero la diferencia es de las personas. ¿Sí?
Absolutamente. Okay, second round. For John. Have you or Forrester ever looked at the pharma industry regarding customer experience? Have you done any analysis on that?
Pharmaceutical industry, no, we have not.
You know, okay.
Nope.
Okay, let's pass to the next question then. Hablamos de un cliente como relación unidireccional. ¿Cómo conseguir una experiencia unívoca? Es decir, ¿cómo conseguir el cambio en el ADN de la empresa? ¿Es necesario que la empresa disfrute con el cliente si queremos conseguir esta relación con él?
I have some bad news for you there. Our research shows that, at least in the United States, the companies that successfully make this transition, almost without exception, they are forced to make this change. They are forced to make this change because of the recession, a catastrophic macroeconomic event, a CEO is sued and in jail because of some kind of crime, acquisition, they're bought by a company or they acquire a company, or the competitive pressure is so great, as with Delta, they had a leadership change that was phenomenally important for them. We don't have any examples of companies right now, except for Delta in their early stages, of established companies that have made this shift gracefully because of some kind of awakening or recognition that customer experience matters. That simply does not happen. What we do find is that there is a difference between companies that were founded on customer experience as a non-negotiable driving principle. Those companies do really well. They always stay in touch with the customer. They're always very good. And companies that have to reinvent themselves in a customer-centric way. The reinventors are very, very small in number. It's extremely, extremely rare to see this. As one of my analysts like to say, and please take this with a grain of salt, but as she likes to say, if you have to make the business case for customer experience, you've already lost the game. Because the leading companies that just live and breathe this culturally, they're already light years ahead of you in innovation, in design, in measurement, in hiring, and in culture.
Okay, thank you. Now, Steven, this is an interesting one for you. Differences between a corporate customer with several speakers or people around and residential ones from a customer experience point of view.
So you're talking B2B versus B2C, essentially, differences. I think I've done quite a bit of work in both of those sectors, and we've spoken a little bit about making personal and memorable moments, emotional moments. And I actually tend to think that B2B is more about emotion and more about relationship than B2C. If you go into a store and buy a bottle of Coke, it can be quite a functional experience. If you are going to sell a £1 million server system or ship containers from A to B, that's you may think you've got an accounting relationship going on there, but there's a lot of dependency on the trust and the personal interaction. So that, for me, B2B is more about customer experience in many ways and more about relationship than B2C.
Absolutely, absolutely. Alain, next one. Talking about the people on the guy in the call center. De acuerdo, no era un mal empleado, pero ¿cómo proceder con un cliente como Vincent Ferrari? Entiendo que cómo prever futuros Vincents. Al actual quizá debería haberle dado la razón y tratar de llegar a un diálogo y darle las gracias por los años que estuvo en la compañía.
Probably. I mean, not knowing the situation in detail, I think the customer clearly wanted to leave. There might have been, I mean, it was kind of clear that the customer wanted out. So, I mean, yes, there is probably a good cost to give it maybe one try, you know, just to see, is everything clear, is everything okay? Giving it 16 tries and pulling the customer back probably will destroy more. Also because, I mean, especially in a telco environment, customers go away, but also may come back. There may be a very good reason why the guy wanted to cancel, which he might not have even wanted to share. My girlfriend left and, you know, I don't want to use this internet account anymore and I want to get a different one or whatever. So I would say it's not about always agreeing with the customer. That's not what I'm saying. But if the customer very clearly expresses, in this particular case, a desire to leave or a desire to buy something, you can coach him, you can ask a few questions, but I wouldn't be that insistent indeed.
Okay, thank you. Juan, una pregunta para ti, y estaba muy en línea con la que nos has respondido antes, o con la respuesta que nos has dado. Tú hablas de esencia, de experiencia, de lo auténtico, entonces todo esto es más fácil cuando estamos hablando de sexy product como Apple, como parques de atracciones y demás. Sin embargo, cuando tienes un producto que no es apetecible comprar, como el que te obligan, como puede ser un seguro, como puede ser una hipoteca, la pregunta es más difícil generar experiencias en compras que no son placenteras que en las que sí lo son?
Para mí la cuestión no es de dificultad. Bueno, es más difícil, yo creo que es más sostenible si lo consigues, porque no están en función de lo que pueda variar el producto, de la moda o de que te nazca otro producto parecido. Es decir, cuando la diferencia la marcan las personas, por ejemplo, eso es muy difícilmente copiable. El producto te lo pueden copiar. Pero dejarme esas 7 sensaciones memorables, que estos tíos me conocen, que me puedo fiar de ellos, que they care, se preocupan por mí, esto lo podía hacer vendiendo tuberías. Entonces me parece que no es excusa que un producto no sea sexy para no crear una experiencia. La experiencia no la crea un producto, la experiencia la crea una serie de un equipo llámale actores si quieres, que hay detrás, en el canal que sea, pero tiene que ser evidentemente prestada de forma distinta, pero la experiencia tiene que ser consistente. Y eso es muy difícil de copiar. ¿Es más difícil de hacer? Pues yo creo que es que no sé, para mí no es... El tema no es si es más difícil, probablemente lo será, sí. Pero precisamente por eso arraiga más y es más difícil de copiar.
Claro, digamos que es más necesario, ¿no? Porque todos nos hemos encontrado a veces lo contrario, ¿no? Productos que se venden solos porque el producto o la marca es muy atractivo y sin embargo no encuentras la atención adecuada.
Sí, no, absolutamente, pero creo que ahí es donde más hay que hacerlo.
Absolutamente. Bueno, tengo algunas preguntas más en concreto para Steven, pero también tenemos aquí los micrófonos por si hay alguien que nos quiera hacer la pregunta en directo. No veo nada con las luces. ¿Hay alguien que nos quiera lanzar alguna pregunta? Bueno, pues seguimos con alguna pregunta más que tenemos en concreto para Steven. ¿Cómo se pueden medir las historias del cliente para lograr una representatividad quanti y quali?
Okay, so remember the story is giving you the depth. It's not just answering a short question, the depth of the actionability. So in the story that I mentioned about the Xperia phone, that little story that came, that spoke about the film cover on my phone being difficult to put on, the phone going dark, and the story from my daughter about liking the playground when they brought all the equipment out. You get that degree of depth which makes it more actionable to understand what to do. And that's the key point. So much in quants, because of the nature and limitation of the survey, gives a generic thing, its look and feel, its ease of use. What does that mean? What's the actionability? So the stories give the actionability. The question was about, that sounds like qualitative data. How do you quantify that, if I'm getting the intent of the question? Well, the way we did that is that we asked the consumers to openly, first of all, without prompting, give their story, their narrative around a situation. So in this particular case that I gave the example, the operator, the situation was around the recommendation. When you recommend, essentially, paraphrase a little bit, when you recommend to your family or friends the use of the phone, what story would you tell? Something like along those lines. So you give the situation as well as asking for the story. And it's very important to have that situation in play rather than ask for a generic what do you recommend, in my opinion, because the situation leads people down the path about what the action is that they're talking about, what the story is they're talking about. So a situation of speaking about recommendation to a friend is going to be a different situation than if you're going to buy. So define the situation, leave the story open, let them define the narrative. Now the question about quantifying that is important. Most of qual, you get a load of data in and you use a text algorithm, or you get somebody, a qualitative researcher, to do content analysis on and say, I'm a researcher, I say it's X, Y, and Z. Now they're putting their own bias onto that analysis. A text algorithm is not perfect, let's be honest with it. And many times you go back to human interpretation because the text algorithm is limited in what it can do. It doesn't pick up context, doesn't pick up metaphor. So what we do is once the consumers have written their story, we also ask them to do what's called self-signification. They themselves rate it, they quantify that story against a series of important essentially, if you like, key KPIs, like does it drive recommendation? Does it drive satisfaction? Does it drive, or is it important to customer effort score? How important is this to churn? Paraphrase a little bit, but what I'm trying to give you is the sense of what we do. Stories, and then me, the customer, self-signify, quantify what that story means in terms of, say, for instance, my recommendation. So then you get both. It's quali-quant. You get qualitative information that is quantified against a key KPI. What we're looking for is more stories like this that are positive against, say, NPS, and less stories like this, like that we've seen that are destructive of NPS. So you get the quantification that the consumer has given against the story, and you get the actionable detail, which makes it quite different from this normal split between quantitative on one side, which gives you less actionability but more stats, and qualitative on the other side, like going to the focus groups, that gives you a lot of depth, but you don't know what's important. It's both together, and that's what it makes unique. So it's given actionable detail that is quantified, which as a business is what you want. You want to know what are the drivers and destroyers of our business and what should we do about it. And remember also that the nature of this is to look for perceptual moments. Look for things that are often memorable stories that are not uncovered in traditional surveys. What's top of mind? Like from this conference, I might say what's top of mind was the lollipops that Jorge was going to give out to us all for those who hadn't had a lollipop when we were kids. So that's a memorable moment that is often small, perceptual, changes all the time. Remember that concept of resilience. So that's why it's an important means of getting actionability, continuously monitoring through time, that concept of resilience, but also critically, it is quantified, and it has to be quantified. Otherwise, you come up with 100 different actions, and you don't know what to do. Quali-quant.
Ok, thank you. Bueno, con esto ya vamos a acabar la ronda de preguntas. Muchas gracias, Juan Serrano, Alain, Steve Walden y Paul Dalton. Ha sido un placer teneros aquí y, por supuesto, os invitamos a que os quedéis el resto de la jornada. Muchas gracias.
Gracias a ti, Mar.
Después os haremos entrega de vuestros dibujos y de nuevo muchas gracias a nuestros amigos de Dibujo a Domicilio.